Welcome back, everybody, to Gray Maybe. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are a frequent listener of Gray Maybe, thank you for coming back again and again and possibly sharing it with other people or talking about it. I really, really appreciate that. It really helps me grow the podcast and helps me stay motivated to keep putting out more content. If you're new to Gray Maybe, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you find something here that helps or that you relate to or that resonates. And I hope you keep coming back. I have 3 seasons already recorded, so please feel free to look around, anything that jumps out at you. Today is one of my favorite days because I have my returning guest on the podcast. Every season I've been able to have this guest. She is educated in the field of therapy. She has a master's. I wish I could call her a doctor, but I don't think that's her official title. Her official title is LMFT. Her name is Jaayda Ellingham, and she is back. Jaayda, welcome to the podcast again. This is your 4th time. Do I need to get you a jacket or something?
Yes, a chair.
Yeah, a chair. Like on SNL, they give jackets. Yeah, you could get a director's chair. 4th time. This is your 4th time on the podcast. Thank you for clearing your schedule and coming back again and again and again. I very much appreciate it. But for those people who may not know who you are, do you want to talk a little bit about who you are? I didn't do the best job setting up your credentials because, you give it.
Okay. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. That is the LMFT that you heard Jillian say. What that is a psychotherapist. I'm not a doctor, no. I have a master's in clinical psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy.
And that is more than I have. Much more. Jaayda gives me street cred. I always love having her on the podcast. So
you have a master's
we've talked.
In life.
Yes. Oh my God. Hard knocks. Not really, but it like suburban hard knocks. So everybody knows what that is. So this season, I told you a couple days after the election, I think, I was like, are you ready to be on the pod? We're going to do another season. We're going to do it about abuse. And of course, you were like, before I could even tell you more, you're like, yes, I'm in, of course.
Yes, my favorite.
Yeah. Every time I have you on, it's like just the not terrible topics, but like nothing is light on this pod. Yeah, it's necessary. So I don't know. I mean, you're going to have a lot to say about this. I mean, let me just jump off here. For anyone who's listening, like, do you want to tell me a bit about how you would help someone who might be processing abuse? And if you have any other like personal experiences you want to draw on and share.
Boy, do I have some. But anyway, let's start with somebody comes to me, right? I'm doing a thorough intake. Usually I give them a measure called Adverse Childhood Experience, ACE. Okay,
what does that mean? What is an adverse childhood experience?
Well, I'm going to read you.
Okay, you're going to.
Is that okay?
Are you going to give it to me because I already aced this test?
Well, yeah, you let me know. You let me know.
Okay. All right.
Which
I'll do it. Put your hand up. Put a finger down every time. Okay.
Okay. Number 1, did a parent or other adult in the household often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you? Yes.
Yes.
Did they act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt?
Yes.
Okay. Number 2, did a parent or other adult in the household often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you?
Slap.
Did they ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured?
No.
3, did any adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way?
5 years older?
Yeah.
I have one at a cusp. I have a cusp. I have a cuspy.
Did they try to or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal sex with you?
No.
Okay. Did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you? Did you often feel that your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if needed?
No, but my dad was an alcoholic. If it was just him doing things, possibly, but my mom was doing everything. Yeah.
Okay. Number 6, were your parents ever separated or divorced?
No.
That usually comes as a surprise to people because they don't
Right.
think that
They don't think
is,
that would qualify them.
uh-huh.
Right.
Number 7, was your mother or stepmother, was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her?
No.
Was she sometimes or often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard, or
No.
ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes or threatened with a gun or knife?
No.
Okay, number 8. Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or
Yes.
alcoholic or who used street drugs?
No street drugs that I
Okay,
know of.
number 9. Was a household member depressed or mentally
Yes.
ill? Yeah, or did a
That's
household
my
member
own.
attempt suicide?
So I'm just going to insert this because my parents, neither one of them were ever diagnosed with anything, but I have very strong suspicions that my dad was depressed, clinically depressed, which is why he drank a lot. And I do think my mom suffers from a pretty high level of anxiety. That's me taking their inventory. None of that has been actually diagnosed, but that's been my feeling on it. Okay, sorry.
Okay, and then just the last one. Did a household member go to prison?
No.
Okay. So you can see right there, right? I am doing an assessment of those numbers, right? So I'm looking to see where somebody endorses that adversity.
Did I pass?
Oh, you got a few.
I
right?
qualify?
Yeah, so let me
qualify?
read this to you. So when we're talking about domestic abuse, right? Evidence indicates that children who are exposed to 4 or more ACEs in childhood are at increased risk of experiencing physical and mental health problems throughout their lifetime. Research consistently demonstrates the significant impact of ACEs on continuing cycles of domestic abuse. Okay,
Yeah,
so the
so
reason
it's-
I'm doing that intake, the reason I am gathering that information is that gives me a start
Right.
to what somebody's going through. So let's say they are depressed or anxious. You know, most of these people are going to, if you are in a cycle of abuse, they are going to be high level anxiety,
Right.
codependent, right?
Hypervigilant.
Hypervigilant, right? Hyper aroused, maybe even hypo aroused. I'm numb,
Right.
right? So either I'm panicked or I'm numb. And with my work is I'm helping people regulate, essentially regulate. And how do I do that? I help them by identifying their process, right? So I'm helping them learn about themselves, where they're at in the moment, to be able to identify the thoughts, feelings, and action tendencies, right? So my thoughts, what are my thoughts? What are the themes of my thoughts? What are my feelings? What are my body sensations in the present moment when I'm triggered, right? And then how do I create space around that to move my behaviors in the direction of what I want?
I
That's
just
what I
started
do.
smiling because I was
I see
thinking
that.
about
Sounds
about
great.
a recent. I just have to share this. This is so terrible. A recent experience. We had just done a really long drive to Vegas. I have a almost 7-month-old, 6.5-month-old. Did great on the car ride. We're pulling into Vegas, and then we went to see some family, and we're on the way back from the family, and now this kid has had it, right? Justifiably, right? Has had it. We're minutes away, but it's full, and we're in the car, so I can't take them out, and I can't take them out, do anything to because Vegas Strip, people are driving nuts anyways.
Yeah.
So just screaming. This kid is screaming. I'm sitting right next to them, and I can't do anything about it. And I was like, I want to bash my head against this window right now. Not because the sound of the crying puts me into such a hyper state of panic and stress, like the stress of me not being able to solve it. Because I know if I just take them out, she'll stop crying. But I can't. That kind of
You're feeling trapped.
yeah, and that type of what it's called almost what happens when people witness violence and they can't do anything about it, right? Like that type of stress is what was being activated in me, and all I could do was keep myself from slamming my head against the window because that's what I wanted to do. So that's where I go in moments of stress.
Yeah, right.
Full reptilian brain, self-harm to deal with the stress.
Well, exactly, right? So if you were my client and you were to tell me that, there's a few things that I'm assessing now. Well, first of all, is danger to others, which you're fine, right? Because you have a level of self-awareness, which is what I would be trying to expand.
Right.
So how do we tolerate that distress within our body? We have to also know our sensory profile, right? We have to know, are we like hyper aroused in general? Do we get overstimulated in general? Right.
And especially with sound and noise levels for me.
Exactly. Right. So that's one, but also our adverse childhood experiences, that history can play a role in that being amplified for you.
Right. Not being trapped, not being able to escape. Yeah.
And then the idea that I need to solve it.
Right.
This place of hyper responsibility stems from adverse childhood experience, the child of an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. It was for you to solve, not him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
So in that, right, I just expanded, you already know this, but I just expanded your awareness by highlighting these things. Mm-hmm. And what am I doing? I'm normalizing it. Mm-hmm. I'm validating it, right? Because if I don't do that, you're not going to share. You're not going to open up.
Right.
You're going to start to do what hyper-responsible people do. They engage in self-blame and shame. Mm-hmm. Because they were held to a greater responsibility than their parent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which you were.
And yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And so going on along with the like abuse in general, we're talking super generally, like we might get specific here and there, but the season is very general. It's going to be all over the place. So hopefully whatever experiences someone might have, they're going to find some episode that might really resonate. I hope every episode resonates with someone, but I think there's going to be certain episodes that certain people are gravitated towards. Like seems to be this very common thread amongst people who have experienced abuse or trauma stuff, and it's that they don't even recognize it as abuse when it's happening. And even sometimes in the days, weeks, months, years that follow, they don't recognize it. I can say for myself, like that for sure was me. Like we'll start at the beginning. So I always knew my dad had a problem with alcohol, even though he was very functional, because that was something my mom always talked about. So I already knew that what that was. But I didn't necessarily till I became an adult realized that the way he spoke to my brother and I as children was very emotionally abusive, extremely emotionally abusive, and was a direct, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? A direct result of some of the choices I made, how I talked to myself, a lot of things to unpack there. But then, it took me many years to really accept that the boyfriend I had in high school was physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually abusive, right? And then it's taken me years in my adult life to notice these other times where I was like, oh yeah, that thing happened. And that was like totally assault, like I could have filed a police report, or that was like what I will call ethical assault. When someone's in a place of, superiority, a boss, a mentor, a teacher, a something, right? You might not even be different ages, but even a peer that I might have more social clout, right? Someone who's like really well celebrated, like a celebrity, like you might be the same age and in the same career, but if they're a celebrity and you're not, like, right, there's still, even though they're not directly above you, they still hold social clout more than you. So that keeps you from saying anything like that, all of that
authority.
Yes. Like that. So what I would call like breaches of ethics, right? Where someone should be able to look and say, hey, I'm a teacher in this situation, or I'm a boss in this situation, or I'm a mentor in this situation, or I'm a celebrity in this sense, and be like, what doing that may make it so that they can't say truthfully how they feel. And in that sense, all of this I shouldn't say because I have a leg up, right? I'm abusing my ethics. I think as a side note, I don't need to get into this. I think we spend a lot of time culturally dealing with morals when we should really be focused on ethics. But that's my own thing. So all of these though have one thing in common, is that in the moment I didn't necessarily know or think that they were abusive or that I was dealing with abuse until way after the fact. And why do you think this keeps coming up, is that people are like, I didn't know I was molested. I didn't know I was raped. I didn't know, and then of course it becomes the difficulty in getting any kind of justice or peace after, because people then are like, well, why didn't you do anything in the moment? There's this idea that you should know it when it happens. You should have the courage to do something about it, and that people aren't actually afraid for their safety or anything.
You're surviving.
Yeah.
So you're so busy surviving.
Yeah.
That you're not recognizing what's happening.
And survival is many things, right? Not always well, I'm going to say this and then you can adjust it. Like we call people survivors, and you're surviving. It's not always actual surviving your life. I feel like it's surviving the moment because you become hyper embarrassed, or surviving the moment because other people are watching, or surviving
your nervous system. Your nervous system is in survival mode. Right? So what I'd be looking at is, how is your nervous system in survival mode? What are those themes that keep popping up? For me, what I'm hearing you say is that during my childhood, I became hyper responsible. If I became hyper responsible, then I was, I have to also protect that part too, right? Because to be responsible is to also protect myself from consequence of an alcoholic, whether it be the emotional volatility.
Yeah, an act of self-preservation.
The emotional volatility. Right. But that's a lot on the nervous system, especially if you're a sensitive kid.
Yes, and walking on eggshells, or then, like my brother and I would aggravate, like we would, even though we knew what was going to happen, we would still always end up in the same place because we could never express our emotions, so we would take them out on each other. And it always happened to be like around when my dad was around, and then he would just like lose it, and then it was like really bad. So but we did this every time. Like we couldn't stop ourselves. It was so crazy.
But it's not crazy. You're a kid.
Right.
So there's another example of where you were held more responsible, or you held yourself more responsible. You were a child. Even if you're a teen, you're a child.
Right.
No, you cannot. You're going to keep doing the same behaviors because you're a kid seeking attachment from a primary attachment figure and not getting it. Right? So in your kid with an underdeveloped frontal lobe.
Right.
Your parents were responsible, not you.
Well, they couldn't manage their feelings either, so.
But you asked, right? Why do we get ourselves in these situations and not know?
Right. Me and my brother would continuously just do it over and over and over again. Like, don't you know what's going to happen? Yeah, we would do it again.
You didn't have that parent. You didn't have that parent that came back from something, that repaired the rupture, that said, hey, it's not your job. This is not your job. My mood is not your job, Jillian. You didn't have that parent. Okay? So if you had that parent, which most people don't have that parent.
I had the parent that said, don't upset your father.
Right, because
you guys don't piss off your father. You're responsible for his rage.
Understandably. Yeah. Understandably. And also, who knows? Your mom could also have hypersensitivities to the distress that she's anticipating.
100%.
And then 100%. Just wanting to manage it. And when she's managing it, she's like, don't piss off your father.
Yeah,
and you're
course.
Like, your responsibility, even though she's not saying, she would never say, this is your responsibility, Jillian, as a kid. Of course. Right? But you need people to narrate these experiences. And that's what therapy really is. See, I'm just narrating what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
You say. I'm catching those themes that you're saying. I'm saying, oh, there's hyper responsibility. Oh, there it is again. Oh, she just did it again. Right? So I, in my mind, go responsible. Wow. I know you as one of the most responsible humans I know you, and this is one of the greatest things about you. You are so loyal and so responsible, and those of us that can love you are so lucky, But then it leads me to this: boundaries. Who taught you how to set a boundary and maintain a boundary in childhood?
I have zero.
Right. Oh my God, I'm tearing up because I love you. Okay.
Every
episode.
season, Jaayda must cry. But this is one of the greatest things about Jaayda is that she's never too good to do what to preach her practice or practice what she preaches, because you're always really okay with expressing yourself and your emotions and feeling the feels and letting them run through. But it is not a Jaayda episode if Jaayda doesn't cry.
No. And also, no. I actually, to be honest, I can't help myself. So this is part of my sensory profile. You will see me hover high. That's just what happens. And so I wish it was just about authenticity, but really it's about that I can't. I'm not.
That's
trying to
authentic, though. That's authentic.
Well,
yeah, that's ultimate authenticity. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people who might be confused about what therapy is a little bit. I've heard a couple things lately where I've had, I don't have to do anything, but I have chosen to correct. When someone says something like, I need to get a therapist so I can get some advice, I'm like, that's not what therapy is. And in fact, if you get a therapist that's giving you advice, not suggestion, right? Not like, hey, next time this happens, let's try to take a few deep breaths, or let's try to just pause and notice what's going on. Like, not that. Like advice, like you should leave your so-and-so, or you should do this, or like, we're talking life changes, right? That's not a therapist. That is something else. I don't know what that is, but run away from that.
No, yeah, okay. A therapist isn't perfect, right? A therapist has their own lived experiences, as I do, right? So if I'm working with, clients who are currently in abusive relationships, boy, am I gonna be triggered. I am going to be so triggered because I have my own history of that. I am very aware of what I'm hearing.
Right, because, the dynamics.
Yeah, the dynamics that I'm hearing, and sometimes they're very covert, but they provoke patterns within myself that I recognize as, abuse. And that's the beauty of adversity, if there is any. You become hyper aware of your own felt states. And if you can become hyper aware of your own felt states while hovering over them, meaning you're not at the mercy of them, then you can predict and you can prevent. Right? So I have clients that I hear their stories, and if I get into a pattern of advice giving, and sometimes they're asking for it, I can feel the pull. Right. They're like, tell me what to do.
Solve it for me.
Yeah, solve it for me. And I feel that pressure, right? I want to solve it for them. I really do. I wish I had a magic wand to take it away. Right. Because I feel it. And I know, because I can catch myself, when I'm doing that, I'm anxious by them. And if I'm anxious by them, I'm not in service of them. Right? So I have to really take a step back. I have to ground myself in those moments. And I have to, create space for them so they can create space to have that self-awareness in order to change the life and move in the direction that they want, not my agenda. Right? Yeah. So.
Yeah. There's been a couple other people too that I serve as kind of a sounding board for. It's not a bad thing. When I talk to these people, I totally have the capacity for it. And what that looks like for me is what you're talking about, is where they just tell me things that are really important to them. And I just listen and I validate what's going on with them, regardless if I agree with their what their actions are, regardless if I agree with how they're what they're doing about it, regardless if I agree with even their perspective. I just validate it. I might say it back to them, and then they feel a lot better, right? And that's all, not all, that is a lot of what therapy is. And these particular individuals I'm talking about are very adverse to going to therapy. Now, they don't think there's anything wrong with therapy for other people, but they don't want to go for themselves. And what I'm offering them is that. And I kind of often remind these people, I'm like, this is what therapy is it's someone that you pay to listen to you, and they help validate your situation. That seems like maybe it's not something you need, but look, you're doing it with me. And at a certain point, I don't mind it, the people that are confiding in me in these situations, but at a certain point, like people in general, like you cannot trauma dump on your friends for very long before they're like, oh, fuck this. I can't take this call from this person anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like,
because they lack
not
the
everybody.
skills. They lack the skills that a therapist has. I'm not here to alter your life. I'm not here to control your destiny. I'm merely somebody who is helping you identify what's going on for you by being your auxiliary cord to my frontal lobe. I'm just, we're plugging in my brain, my frontal lobe, because I'm not in the present moment with you, right? And I'm helping you identify, which is going to help you tolerate distress. So distress tolerance is one skill that you will learn. Affect regulation, right? To learn how to regulate your emotions is another skill that you will learn. And you will also learn interpersonal effectiveness. This is all dialectical behavioral therapy. It's what I do. I do this for people. I help you identify your emotional, your sensory, your visceral, right? That visceral experience. I help you identify your current behaviors. And I help create space between stimulus and response in order for you to activate the behaviors in order to change your life. On repeat.
I just want to insert too one thing of my personal recovery journey is that when I first started therapy, I thought I could correctly identify my feelings. And what I found out was that I was very deficient in that area. And that not only could I not properly address and identify, or I couldn't properly identify my feelings, but I couldn't address them really. And I also couldn't tie them to where in my body they lived. And so part of my first beginning of therapy, which I thought was such a fucking waste of time and I was getting so irritated, luckily I stuck with it, was like the therapist I had would be like, what kind of feelings, like where do you feel in your body? I was like, I'm a dancer, lady. I know my body, right? But it was actually like I kept going with it, and I realized a bunch of things. Like my anxiety is a lot in my stomach, and I can't tell the difference. I've said this many times on the podcast. I can't tell the difference between hunger and anxiety. They feel the same to me. So it's no wonder that anxiety and hunger and food and things and not eating and when I'm anxious, like all of that makes very good sense. And then there's an even deeper tie to oftentimes when my dad would fly off the handle and like just rage at me and my brother was around the dinner table, right? So there's another thing of like around eating and like, yeah. And I just want to talk about how that can be like a very great first step if you want to unpack anything, is to get a feeling chart. They're all over Google. Therapists have them. There's pillows with the little color wheel on it, and it's all these emotions. And you just kind of look at it, and you can see what kind of jumps out when you're having any kind of a feeling. That was super helpful to me. And it's super remedial, but it's super helpful because I think what happens, or what has happened to me, is when I'm faced with a situation that, again, like you're saying, the nervous system gets blown out, right? Something is just like too much, whether it's you, and then you go into survival, it like short circuits, right? Almost like a muscle that's been severed. And if you've ever had a surgery where you've had to repair a muscle, that body part doesn't work for a second. It like cuts the energy off. When I had my knee surgery, I couldn't believe how weird it was that I couldn't feel the energy flow through my whole leg. It was like foreign. It felt very weird. It felt very cut off. So it's almost like that. Like you cut it. For me, it feels like there's a cutoff in that moment, like a frazzle, like a frayed fuse, like the old wires that are all like scraggly. And I think like finding the words and the feelings associated with the body and like really unpacking and processing that kind of repairs that frayed wire. So I just wanted to throw that in in case that helps anyone.
You know what also helps, it's very simple, is a mindfulness exercise, and it's very difficult to implement. So most people are going to be like, yeah, I can do that, right? But to be able to notice to stop, Right? So let's say you're in a thought loop.
Always. I am always in a thought loop.
Obsessive sort of thought
I
loop.
have rumination is my favorite, not my favorite, but my most consistent OCD trait.
It's a strategy of survival.
Yes.
Okay. So when we notice ourselves in that thought spiral, there's at some point, it doesn't matter if it's 2 hours, 2 hours in, the moment you notice, oh shit, I've been in this thought spiral for 2 hours, is not the opportunity to beat yourself up. It's the opportunity to hover over it and say, okay, stop. Now we're going to breathe. And it's not just like breathe, like you have to breathe to slow it down and then observe. Okay. When I'm saying observe, I'm saying pull out. What are the themes of that thought spiral? So give me some themes of a typical thought spiral for you, Jillian.
So for me, I will do, you can pick one. Sometimes I'll replay a really embarrassing event or like a time that I like forgot I had a gig and was really late and like frantic and like super embarrassed and mortified. Like I'll replay that one sometimes. Sometimes I'll get on a loop about something I'm really afraid of, like getting in a car accident or someone I know getting in a car accident, and I'll be on that loop for a really long time. Sometimes I will get in my head like, not a self-harm, but I'm going to harm. Sometimes it's me. Like sometimes if I'm in a waiting room or something and it's a high-up building, I look out. I'm like, what if I jumped? Like I could jump. I could like break the window and I could jump. Like I'm not suicidal, but then I get in that loop and I can't stop thinking about it. Like, would I stop like, why can't I stop thinking about it? If I'm not suicidal, why am I still thinking about it? You know, like that type of thing. So you can pick one. Which one would you like to help me with today?
It's really therapeutic for me to laugh at you.
It is. Listen, I'm laughing, so it's fine that you're laughing. And this is the thing, actually, before you even go through this, part of me unpacking it is, noticing it, right?
Yeah.
Because that's already a win. Because like you said, 2 hours in, right, it could take a really long time for you to realize I've been ruminating. Sometimes you don't know you're doing it because your brain is so active. So that's number one. Then number two is I will make a joke. I'll be like, wow, what a really interesting thought to have. Like, wow, like sometimes some of the things I think are so outrageous that it's easy for me to be like, that is really outrageous. Like, I can't believe my brain offered me that thought. Like, wow, that's...
So let me go back to your three options. I don't need to do all three options. I don't need to do one option. I think what we're looking at is escape. All three options are the desire to escape as a theme. I need to get out of here. Right? I don't want to feel embarrassed.
Right.
I need to get out of here, or I need to escape the dread of loss.
Yeah.
And I need to escape the sensory overload of this room. Right? So I need out. Go. Right? So I just hear a thought that I need to escape. I need to escape. Right? And then we might have other themes of embarrassment. We might have other themes like we just highlighted, right? And then I'm looking at what is the sensations underneath that. So you see I'm pulling away and we're getting less in the spiral, and we're kind of giving space to understanding the themes of our experience. The feeling of making a mistake, and then the subsequent embarrassment,
imperfection,
shame,
shame,
those themes.
Yeah.
Right? And the thought loop is an attempt to avoid the feeling. So
and
there,
the other
right?
ones, grief is really hard for me, obviously, like anxiety around grief, pending grief. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And responsibility.
Yeah.
There's the responsibility of, living your life.
And that I can change it. Like I can, if I just, the control, the illusion of control, right? Because I'm out of control ultimately. Yeah. And because it's hard for me to accept that, I'm always trying to control. Yeah.
Right. And we don't have agency over our mortality, really.
Yeah. In very
I wish I did.
some circumstances, but not really. Yeah.
Yeah. But that anticipatory grief really highlights a value for life. It's not all bad. in all these
Right.
situations, right? In all three examples.
Yeah.
Your nervous system needs out. Your nervous system needs a break.
Yeah.
So if we went to, we hover over that experience and we understand that the action tendency is to live in our mind because really, it wasn't acceptable to have a voice.
No.
No, you didn't.
No.
Your needs were not met when you exercised your voice. So you've been living in your head because that's the safest place to purge it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
so
a
this
light
is
bulb
therapy.
moment for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a light bulb moment for me.
Oh, you're welcome.
I know I didn't tie
just
that. I got it for free. Ha ha. But I never correlated the fact that because I grew up in a way that was like very much authoritarian parenting style, authoritarian parenting style, where it's like the parents are the absolute, whatever they say goes. They don't do any wrong. You shut up. Children are seen, not heard. Like all those things that, anything was kind of talking back. There was no debates. There was no negotiation, like to the point where I really didn't learn that as a skill until I was an adult, which made being a gig worker very difficult, right? It was really hard for me to negotiate my own money. So I just had no idea how to set boundaries, zero idea on how to do that. And, but I didn't correlate the overthinking to that when you are silenced, you live in your head, right? Your voice doesn't stop talking. It just stays in your head. To the point where I explain my feelings of depression and suicide with not when I have been suicidal in my life is that I didn't want to escape my body. I wanted to escape my mind, right? So which has actually helped me from committing suicide because I realized that my mind is what is driving me nuts. And so if I can quiet my mind, or sometimes I'll do things like I will clean up my house or my area if I start to feel a little like super worthless stuff, because sometimes it's just I feel messy. And so sometimes if I can't clear my brain, I'll clear my space, and that starts. And sometimes that's really hard to do when you're depressed, and that's like one thing to get you up and moving, and then you can feel a little accomplished. Things seem a little more calm in what you're looking at. If you're someone like me who a lot of things and mess will strike kind of some anxiety, whatnot. But I'd never tied those two things together. So thank you for that gem today for me.
I mean, this is how I work with it. So I'm just giving you an example of what that looks like, using you as the example, and all those three things that you said. I kind of simplified it for you. Now, when you are in your life, you might notice that.
Yeah.
So what did I do? I turned on that part of your brain to have you notice it, and notice it in a theme. So it's less messy now.
Yeah.
We don't have to make it big, gigantic, huge, overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, it also makes sense too that, I have a lot of things now to counteract those things. Like I have you as a best friend, which is very helpful. And then I have an actual therapist that I pay to do that, to talk to. And then I'm also a part of many 12-step programs where you go and you share. No one's allowed to judge or comment on it, and you can only speak for a certain amount of time. So you get in the habit of sharing things that are coming up instead of them living in your head, right? So I have 3, and then I also have like other friends and a significant other and cats that are roaming that I can talk to, but the minute I say things out loud, it kind of, like we've talked about in other episodes, it kind of like shines a light on it and then it disappears, or it diminishes, or I just feel better about it, and it can
instead
leave
of avoiding,
my head.
Instead of avoiding, which is, we're taught, this is a cultural problem, I think. We are taught that what we put our mind to expands. So let's look at obsessive thinking.
Right.
How helpful
are you talking
is
about
that?
like The Secret and stuff, like law of attraction?
Yes.
Okay, because I just want to talk about this because I would love to believe in that, but as someone who has rumination OCD, it brings me quite a bit of stress because
and
if
OCD.
I am if my brain, because of the way it works, because of trauma, because of the way I was born, whatever it is, neurodivergent, whatever, like if I'm ruminating on a car accident, because that is not a favorite that I love, it's just how it is for me. And in times of stress or great care of things, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so if I'm ruminating on a car accident, but then on top of that, I'm like, I'm going to make it happen because I'm going to bring it to me, and everything I think about, I'm going to get. Like, do you know how stressful that so fucking stressful.
Is? Yeah, it's also shame-based. So.
Oh my God, so shame-based, because I'm like, I'm going to get myself in a car. I'm bringing it to myself. Like, I'm attracting myself.
Yes.
And
you are responsible for your destiny. Okay. Yes, and that's not the strategy to get yourself out of it, right? So this real strategy that we're talking about is to notice it. And the power in noticing it actually diffuses it. Diffuses it from your identity even, right? So that I'm also working on that. I'm working on this concept. It's acceptance commitment therapy, as I've spoken about. I didn't create it. I think Stephen Hayes did. But is cognitive diffusion, to diffuse in the present moment. And you have to do a lot of cognitive restructuring, reframing, and that's bringing attention to the moment, bringing attention to the thought. But what we're not doing is fusing to it. And really, it's the avoidance of the feeling underneath the thought, or the visceral sensation underneath the thought, that has us fuse to the thought and then begin to go into that thought spiral.
Yeah.
So what I will have my clients do is notice more. And even if they, the next session, I'm like, so what did you notice? I'm usually like, what did you notice? That's all I say. I didn't. Good.
Great.
What?
You noticed that you didn't.
You noticed that you didn't. Awesome. What was happening there?
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, do you think you were numbing? So do you see how I'm meeting the person? I'm like, cool, let's explore it. Let's be curious about it.
There's no wrong answer.
No, there is no wrong answer.
Let's get into it because it all qualifies. Side note, just for anyone who might struggle with car accident OCD rumination, one thing that I do use that helps me is once I start noticing that I'm in a car accident rumination and I'm very fearful of things that are going on around me and stuff, I start to go into, look at all of these cars on the road. There are so many cars on the road. There's so many people driving. Most of them are distracted. Most of them are driving insane. And look, there's no accidents. Like, holy shit. There's so many people on the road right now in different frames of mind. And yet, overwhelmingly, there might be a accident here, a accident there. But like, really, for how many people and how distracted everybody is, it's insane that there's not more accidents. And then I kind of like keep going down that road of looking visually, statistically. I don't have actual statistics, but I'm looking in my reality, and I'm looking and I'm bringing myself to a present moment right now, not what could happen, but like looking around and being like, wow, oh, look at that person driving like insane. It's amazing that something hasn't happened right now. Like, oh, wow. Like, and just that seems to help kind of get me out of that loop a little bit.
That's the cognitive piece. So that's the piece that you're doing. You're beginning to scan for what is challenging that thought.
Right.
And then you're noticing that, and it's bringing that to your body essentially. It's bringing that to your feeling. You're having a different feeling from scanning for what is right.
Yeah.
That's one strategy. The other strategy that you could be doing is just looking around and saying, man, I really value my life. I really value my baby. I really value my partner. This is all in service of the love I have for the people, myself included, and the people I exist with.
Yeah.
And right there, you change it. There's gratitude, right?
Right. Yeah, I shift out of the loop.
You redirect your attention. You're redirecting your attention. But what you said was, I have more power in the present moment, which is true. And I think sometimes we've, not sometimes, I believe our dominant culture has done a great disservice to the present moment, because what our dominant culture says is we need to be more present, but what our dominant culture is saying is be more positive instead of being present is to radically accept what is happening in the now.
Right.
And that doesn't always include
the
positive feelings.
And that's why people don't want to be in the present moment, right? That's why they want to be in the future or in the past, because right now sucks in this moment or whatever it is.
Exactly. So if even be there, you're fine.
The best day ever, there are moments that suck. Like your best day ever, you still might be in traffic wishing you could be somewhere else, or running late, or your stomach hurts, or whatever, you need to use the restroom and you can't, or what. You know, like there's still going to be moments that you're not going to be like, I want to be in this moment forever. It's so great. Like, no.
No. And you don't have to be in the moment forever, because it doesn't last forever if you're really just riding it.
Yes. We have a phrase for that in recovery rooms. It's called "this too shall pass." Mm-hmm. And we say it, we say it all the time when things are bad, but we try to say it when things are good. Mm-hmm. That's more difficult, right? It's easy to say "this too shall pass" when things are bad, but it's a little harder to say "this too shall pass" when things are really good. Right. I want to talk a little bit about the cycle of abuse. Mm-hmm. I just want to bring some light onto that, because you notice things. You mentioned earlier how you notice certain things about. You'll be like, oh, that's abuse, right?
Oh, you mean from my abuse, from my history? Yes.
But you that's how you recognize it. That's you'll all of a sudden it like pops up for you. For me, when I see cycles of abuse is like when I see someone, do the nice thing and then do the shitty thing and then do the apology thing and do the nice thing and do the shitty thing and when I see that type of thing going on is when I'm like, there it is. Like, because that can be a leader can do that. Someone who's running a country can do that. Someone, like it can be, I'm not saying anyone specific or inferring. I'm just saying that it's a cycle of abuse, right?
Yes.
It's a cycle of abuse. It's a cycle of doing something terrible. And then, nobody loves you more than I do. You're so perfect and pretty and great. You're very special. And then do the shitty thing again.
Yeah, it's even more than that. So therapy is about breaking it down. So you have the honeymoon phase, and you have, and this is what we missed, is the tension.
Yeah.
And then the abuse. Honeymoon phase, tension, abuse. And over time, it's very intermittent. So it's really hard to identify it in the moment that it's happening to you, right? But the tension piece is, I think, the part that keeps you in it.
The addiction part, the addictive part.
It could be. I have that history of being the fixer, being the people pleaser, and really succumbing, my empathy actually, the resonance of other people, really succumbing to the tension piece where I would overcompensate during that tension only to get abused, right? But only to turn around and have it be, the honeymoon phase where the person values you, completely values you. And then there's some tension, and then there's the abuse. And then values you. Then there's the tension, and then there's the abuse. For me, it was really about codependency. So this idea that if you're good, I'm good. Because quite literally, if they were good, I was better because of how I experienced people's suffering. I am very attuned to other people's experiences. I am very empathetic, meaning I can literally feel the experience outside of me in my body. And I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know until grad school in a group therapy class where we learned about group therapy, when I was sitting in a circle with a bunch of other students, that I was feeling anxious. I was sitting there in that circle going, man, why am I'm feeling so sick right now. And for the first time in my life, I looked up. I looked up and I looked around, and I noticed a young student, like her leg was shaking and she was hunched over. And all of a sudden I said, oh my God, there it is. There's the anxiety. And then the difference is I said, hey, are you okay? And she burst into tears. And in that moment, what I recognized within myself is that I don't just have my own anxieties. I carry others' anxieties. And that was such a pivotal moment in my life. That was post-abuse, really. Understanding the mechanism of my empathy and how my empathy can get twisted and get really dark. And so for me, this is what surprised me most about myself during my history of 2 very, very abusive relationships. So, 1, those abusive relationships don't start up abusive. Okay, you're usually drawn to people for a myriad of different reasons. For me, at the time that I was in these relationships or initiated these relationships, I like to say it was prior to my frontal lobe being fully developed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I give myself that break. I was basically a kid, and I didn't know that people existed like this. I was not aware of this kind of suffering.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't come from this type of suffering. So for me, I was taught that if it's meant to be, it's up to me.
Right. And there's also usually these types of relationships are with someone who's very charismatic, someone who, is or very much makes you feel very special.
Absolutely.
Right. Who doesn't want to feel very special and like the center of someone's world, especially if you grew up maybe like I did, where people, I treat you this way because I love you kind of shit, like you're already primed for it.
For me, then this is why you have to be curious about people, because for me, very, very different. I wasn't primed for it. In fact, I was special. I was treated special. I also performed very special. So that got very much reinforced in me. Because if I could, I was the fixer, the problem solver, the mood shifter, and that got that hit of dopamine, got that surge, because it was very rewarding and I was good at it. I was good at it, and I was in charge of my destiny. I had 100% control until I didn't, until I met certain types, very, very, and I hate saying pathology, I don't really love pathology, but, very narcissistic. The first one had traumatic brain injury for sure, was a football player, and also had his own history of abuse. And this might come as a shock. I think you know this, but like after me, he ended up getting remarried and he murdered his wife. So he's in prison. And yeah, I was in a relationship like that.
And you saw why you saw how he could murder his wife.
Well, it could have been
that
me.
Was not a shock to you.
No. In fact, it was the type of abuse that it went from 0 to 60 very quickly. It wasn't like, it was just one day he was saying something and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to love him. And I put my hand on his leg and he threw me against the wall.
Whoa.
He threw me, I went flying against the wall. I think I had a peak experience. I was like, I'm flying.
Oh my God.
I hit the wall. I stood up really quick, and this was a big man. He was about 6'4", about 6'3", 6'4", 240 pounds, 245 pounds, solid muscle. And he chased me around our apartment.
Wow.
I grabbed my keys and I left. And then when I came back, which was maybe when he calmed down, I was like, I have to have a plan. I have to play nice, and I'm out of here. So I played nice until I could leave. I created my own plan. You weren't around for that one.
No, this was
Tara.
Yeah.
Tara was part of my safety plan. Shout out to Tara.
Anyway, yeah, we'll tag her. Yeah, I mean it's amazing that you left after the first one. Thank God you did. Who knows what would have happened, right?
Well, had he known that I wanted to leave, then I would have been in trouble.
Right. Like there's so many people that don't leave after the first one because of whatever reasons. It's really hard to leave. I mean, it's really, really hard if there's one thing that this election has solidified for me, it's how hard it is to leave an abuser in
Absolutely.
mass,
Absolutely.
right? How hard that is. So that cycle of abuse, I wanted to bring that up because I do feel like that's such a tricky fucker what keeps people really roped in.
I work with, mostly I'm not working with people who are actively in, a cycle of abuse with physical violence.
Mm-hmm.
That is a different, strategy for me. If I recognize that or the person discloses that to me, then it's really about cultivating a safety plan, resources.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But my second relationship, let's go there. You know this person.
I do know this one.
Yes. Yeah. This was the one that wrote my empathy.
Mm-hmm.
This was
very much an emotional codependent. Yeah.
Yes. I became emotionally codependent because this person had episodes of what it would look like bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Very manic, hypomanic, very helpful, very loving.
I can validate too that I experienced this person and they can make you feel like you are the most spectacularly unfounded diamond in the rough, that they're the only person that can see how valuable you are and how has not everybody else seen how amazing you are, and let me do this for you and let me do that, and usually I charge quite a lot of money. I know you can't afford it, so let me do this for you, and then give you these extravagant gifts, like gorgeous extravagant gifts, because I was a recipient of that, and then I was also a recipient of them when they were unhappy with me because of whatever they thought was going on between our friendship. And that was also a very frightening, not for my physical safety, but just very frightening emotionally, right? That this person really could kind of like turn on you in that way. And anyways, so go on. I don't want to take that away.
Yeah, but it hits on control and it hits on codependency, right? It hits on I must have done something, hyper responsibility. So this person would flip. And he never isolated me from my friends. He didn't do the typical things, but he ended up in a covert way isolating me from my friends in some ways because he was so moody. And I felt like I was the person protecting my friends and him.
But you were isolated from your family.
Eventually.
Yes. And I don't think that was your choice. I think that was
my family's
curated
choice
by him.
Yes,
in a very clever way.
Absolutely.
Because you would have recognized a very basic isolation.
Oh yeah. No, I would have.
Yeah, so he got very creative.
Oh, he's good. Yeah, he was good. And also he had a lot of people colluding with him because he could do to them what he did with me, which is what you expressed.
Mm-hmm. He also had a social value higher than yours in like the ethical thing that I was talking about. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Someone who had extreme social clout.
Yes. Power over over me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Pretending to give me power.
Mm-hmm. Or take it away in an instant. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think for me, how I stayed in that cycle for 8, almost 10 years, 8 being with him and the 2 years trying to untether myself romantically from him. It was really because I became very codependent. When he was good, I was good. So I was in that loop with him. And I had a very hard time getting out of it because as much as he was very charismatic, he was also very troubled. And I gave him more compassion than I did myself. Because, hey, if it's meant to be, it's up to me and I can do it. Yeah. And just because I can do it doesn't mean I should, right? So I work with people and I'm often saying, like, sure, you can. You can take responsibility. You can fix this, but should you?
Right.
And I think this is the greatest lesson that I learned being in a relationship with someone like him, is that it's not always appropriate to fix, change, problem solve others, even if you can.
Yeah. Side note on codependency, there is a 12-step program for that for people who might
Coda.
be interested. It's called CODA, and it's like any other 12-step program. There's meetings that are free or by donation. Donations like $2 to $5. New people aren't expected to donate. If you're looking for a place where you can just hide and listen to other people, CODA. There's search online Codependence Anonymous, and you'll find, and I'll tag the resource as well. But that's also something really great to unpack in therapy as well as doing like a 12-step group thing. I have 2 questions left for you. Quick questions, although this first one is not going to be quick, I have a feeling. But if you can wrap it up quickly, why do you think there's so much stigma and shame that surrounds abuse? Any type of abuse?
Because I think it's easier to control the victim than it is to control the perpetrator. I think it's about control.
Excellent answer. Okay, I'll take it. And then my last question for you is, as you know, it's tradition on this podcast not to give quote unquote advice, but do you have any suggestion for anybody who might be suffering with abuse right now?
I think it's really support. And if you can't find support around you, you have to be that supportive person for yourself. Which means that the best thing you can do is to validate your experience, even if you can't say it out loud, and to normalize it. Because this stuff happens when we normalize abuse. When we normalize abusive culture. We do that. We normalize the perpetrators. We shame the victims. So the best way through it is to diffuse from the shame that, for the most part, I think is collective. I think it's coming from the outside in. I never had shame around being with these 2 people. But I did hear messages like, how could you? After the fact.
Wow. Okay.
I thought you were smart.
Oh.
Ouch. Right? I am. I have a master's degree.
What is that? Is it a backhanded compliment? Like,
yeah, but it's not. It's
passive
what we
aggressive.
Do.
Like,
it feels like that, but I think what it is don't ever do that again, because how I feel with you suffering.
Right, you betrayed
pain.
me.
Well, brings me pain. I think our biggest issue in our dominant culture is our lack of skills around empathy. So go to therapy. Go to therapy. Go to somebody who actively works on those processes. The stress tolerance, because if you can't tolerate distress within your body or even outside, you're at the mercy of it. Affect regulation. What can I do in service of regulating my emotions? That does not mean calm. Stop letting the culture tell you it's calm. It just means I'm not panicking and I'm not numbing. I'm able to stay within my window of tolerance. And the third one is to learn how to develop the skill, the flex of communication, and more specifically, the communication of boundary setting and maintaining. You can set boundaries, but can you maintain them? Which means that you have to be able to tolerate distress, know your present moment awareness, like know what's happening in the present moment, be able to tolerate it, and then drive your behaviors in the direction of perhaps communication to self and others, whatever that is defined by you. So go to that type of therapist. Maybe dialectical behavioral therapy, acceptance commitment therapy. These are all the mindfulness-based therapies that are, offshoots of CBT. So instead of just the cognitive piece, we have the emotional piece, the visceral piece, and know your sensory profile. Know what overstimulates you, what has you numb, what has you feel like you're going to have a panic attack, large crowds. It's not that we're avoiding those things, but we need to also accept them
Yeah,
as they are.
the radical acceptance has been kind of a game changer for me for a lot of things. I got that in therapy for sure, and a little bit in 12-step rooms. But the radical acceptance of where I am in this situation when I'm uncomfortable seems like it would be counterintuitive, but it's actually really helpful to like radically accept, be like, this is where I am right now. This is what's going on. And because I have some insight to some of my idiosyncrasies, like noises, like noises will sound louder and more annoying to the point of rage when I'm highly anxious. So I might not know I'm highly anxious or tired, which is like contributing to anxieties or something. And because I'm tired, because I want to get things done, but I can't get them done because I'm tired, like the anxiety of seeing things that need to get done and not being able to do them, right? Noises will become extra stimulating, right? And so it's easy for me to then go, oh, that noise is driving me nuts. I must be extra anxious right now. Like it wouldn't be bothering me as much as it is right now because I am having that moment. And so then I just try to sit with that for a second and know that that's happening. And a lot of times, even just if I acknowledge it, it does get a little bit better.
But checking in with yourself. So
yeah,
you're asking yourself, what is my baseline right now?
Yeah.
So if I'm about to go to a party, which doesn't happen, say I did, I'm going to a party, I'm going to check in with myself and say, where am I at right now? Well, I might notice if I'm accepting myself, I might notice a mild agitation, competing demands. I'm not great with competing demands, but that's okay. Whatever. I'm not trying to strive through that. Our culture is so based on striving, and it really gets us out of that radical acceptance, right? So I might say to myself, well, my baseline is I'm agitated right now. Well, what do I need? Well, getting your needs met. You have to get your own needs met. And then you have to be able to, sometimes when you have competing demands of other people who it doesn't align with, you have to be able to state it.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning getting your own needs met. When I talked to Scott Hislop in another episode, we talked a lot about self-parenting, which really comes into play. Like you had said earlier, if you have a support system around you, great. If you don't, you have to do that for yourself. That means, guess what? You're going to have to do some self-parenting, which means if you don't have a support system around you, you have to be the one to say, treat yourself almost like a child and say, what does this child need? This child needs therapy. This child needs a 12-step program. This child needs someone to confide in. This child needs rest. This child needs to eat. This child needs to express, whatever that is.
Well, this child needs a co-regulating other.
Yeah, someone to help them.
A parent that is, it doesn't have to be calm, but a parent that is regulated enough to co-regulate with the child. Yeah. And that therapy is really, the therapist is reparenting the client.
Yeah.
Through radical acceptance, modeling, and being co-regulated or being regulated enough for that client to co-regulate.
Thank you for parenting me today, Jaayda.
You're welcome.
I did. I got some parenting. I did. I don't know if anybody else will enjoy the episode, but I got my money's worth since I didn't pay anything for it. So,
0.
Lucky me. And I'm wearing my Go to Therapy shirt. If you're watching, if you could see the visual representation of this podcast, I have a Go to Therapy shirt I'm wearing.
I feel like if I wore that, it would be kind of antagonistic.
It is. And this is why I can wear it. It's because I do go to therapy. I'm not a therapist, but I do go to therapy. And actually, I've worn this shirt. I also have the sweatshirt version. And people will comment on it. The best comment I ever got on it was in an elevator at a hotel. This older, tall, black man, not the ideal person you think would be going to therapy, right? Not a white girl wearing a Go to Therapy shirt, like with a, whatever. So he's like, I like your shirt. And I'm like, thank you. I go to therapy. So, I wear this shirt. He's like, I do too. Served 4 tours. It's done me good. It was like, whoa. Yeah. Like, it was that moment. And I was like, bumps, man. Let's go.
Let's destigmatize it because some of us are in therapy for the harm that others have done to us.
Right.
And those people that are harming are not going to therapy.
Right. Yeah. A lot of us go to therapy because other people are not going to therapy.
Great.
Yeah.
But it is skill building. So
Yes.
it's skill building, it's proactive. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. I think most people are afraid to go to therapy because they're afraid the therapist is going to be like, oh shit, something's wrong with you.
Yeah,
and therapists are not doing that. They're not sitting
No.
there judging you. If anything, they're getting really into your process and excitable.
Yeah.
The fact that you've shown up. So
Yeah. Jaayda, thank you so much
Yes.
for coming back the 4th time on the pod, 4-time pod guest. I really can't thank you enough for your expertise and your time, and people love you, so I'm glad you keep coming back.
Well, I love you.
Thank you.
But we
I
know
love you
this.
too. Yes, we're BFFs. I'm very lucky to have such a anyone's lucky to have a good BFF over time and space, and then especially lucky with someone who has so much insight into issues and stuff like that. I will tag Jaayda. All of her information will be all up in the show notes, and I will also, as usual, have show notes to link you to finding therapy and 12 steps and all that good stuff. So thank you so much, Jaayda, and you'll be on the next season's episode.
Trauma 2.0.
Yeah, right? We could keep going, but thank you.
Yeah, of course.